Sonic 4 is one of those strange oddities in the Sonic series that we acknowledge exists, and then we move on. Most fans agreed this game was definitely not canon after Sonic Mania came out, essentially replacing it. Myself included, and have been called out in the comments of previous videos telling me it is. And then, recently, the Japanese Sonic channel dropped an official timeline, and... oh, no. So for those unfamiliar, Sonic 4 Episode 1 started development as Sonic the Portable for mobile phones, but at some point Sega decided to rebrand this as Sonic 4 and had it released on consoles in 2010 as the next official 2D side-scrolling entry following Sonic 3 and Knuckles, which is kind of silly because in the years since Sonic 3 and Knuckles we've had Sonic Advance, Sonic Advance 2, Sonic Advance 3, Sonic Rush Adventure, but what do I know? Around this point in time, the fanbase were very vocal about how they didn't like the direction the main series had taken over the years and just wanted a game like the classic series. It was even advertised for it not having Sonic's friends as playable characters. Did people seriously want Sonic to be the only playable character that badly? Wait, why are you asking me for Java? Since when have you ever asked me for Java? The game came out and was universally considered a cheap imitation of the originals. The visuals felt off, the music felt off, the gameplay and physics felt off. Instead of new interesting level themes and bosses, they were, again, poor imitations of levels from Sonic 1 and Sonic 2, and that pretty much sums up Sonic 4 Episode 1 as a whole, which has no story significance at all, meaning nothing really happens that affects the greater Sonic universe. Because that's how you make a sequel years later, just redoing what the original did, just not as good. And this isn't even the first time we've seen something like this. Sonic Advance was already a retread of elements from the classics, except it had a lot more originality with its level themes, and the gameplay physics were much closer to the classic games, as well as building on them with more moves and abilities for each of its 4 playable characters. And if you want to get real technical, before that we had Sonic Pocket Adventure, which was also a retread of Sonic 2 and 3. Something all 3 of these games have in common is that while today we associate classic Sonic games with having the early 90s design, these all featured the modern Sonic design, and they were all developed in some part by Dimps. Though in context, all these games came out after Sonic's redesign, and the classic appearance was not reintroduced until Sonic Generations, which came out a year after Sonic 4, and is what established the difference between classic Sonic and modern Sonic both visually and gameplay-wise. So just making it clear right away, I don't hate Sonic 4, I actually play Episode 1 and 2 on my phone every now and then. In fact, the mobile version of Sonic 4 Episode 1 plays and looks much better than its console counterpart, somehow. Sonic 4 Episode 2, oh boy. Previously, in my video on Sega Forever, I talked about how when Sega Forever took over the mobile division and made it free with ads, I was unable to restore my purchase despite having proof of purchase, and their customer support were not helpful at all, just giving me a redeem code that didn't work, only for the whole process to repeat a year later where I just gave up. But a little while ago I tried again, and since Sega Forever is no longer an active entity, I actually got help that was helpful, and now I just have the paid version of the game again.
Looks like everything's good then.
Oh yeah, Sonic 4 Episode 2 is a much improved experience over Episode 1 coming out 2 years later, and is only partially retreading ground with a lot of original elements. The game is good, but I wouldn't call it great either. It's still somewhat flawed, it has a bit of story, and owning both Episode 1 and 2 unlocks Episode Metal. Now you're caught up? So why exactly do I think it shouldn't be canon, especially since it's on the new official timeline? And to that I say, clearly you don't know me. I spend way too much time researching Sonic lore. Not obsessed at all. First off, everything in the timeline is there for significance to the world building and overarching story, and yet, here's both episodes of Sonic 4. The story outlined is specified from Episode Metal and Episode 2, so nothing really from Episode 1. The significant events that take place is Eggman resurrects Metal Sonic and turns the returning Little Planet into the Death Egg Mark II, but Sonic stops and destroys the Death Egg. Okay, makes sense. Seems fair, except... No, it doesn't. That's just flat out wrong. It's almost as if someone in the lore team was going off memory after not playing the game in years. Hey, what happens in Sonic 4? Eggman brings back Metal Sonic. Oh yeah, Metal Sonic was beaten in Sonic CD, so he's restored here. So I guess that's canon then. So for context again, in 2012, Christian Whitehead's Retro Engine remaster for Sonic CD had also released, and Sonic 4 tries to tie into it. So Episode Metal starting with Metal Sonic on Stardust Speedway, reusing assets from Sonic Generations I may add, and Eggman on a floating signpost points at him and brings him back to life. Then Metal Sonic flies from Little Planet to Earth, so what's wrong with this? Oh, a lot of things actually! Metal Sonic wasn't just defeated, he got smashed to bits! You see a chunk of his head fly off. Also, you don't just fly from Little Planet to Earth, because Little Planet isn't out in space. Little Planet is mysterious and mystical and appears in Sonic's world for 1 month of every year above Nether Lake. They were very specific about that. I don't know if it shifts between dimensions. I know I'm getting a bunch of comments saying it probably teleports from space. Sure, keep telling yourself that. And furthermore, this isn't even Metal Sonic's return, because as I covered in a short, Metal Sonic's actual return is in Sonic Triple Trouble and Knuckles Chaotix. And if you're already typing in the comments trying to argue those games aren't canon, first of all, why are you watching a video on Sonic lore when you clearly don't care about Sonic lore? Secondly, Triple Trouble is the debut of Fang, and Chaotix was confirmed canon by TalesTube, the very same video that confirmed all the modern characters remember events from the classic games for those who are still trying to convince me it's a different timeline or dimension or whatever. Oh, and Metal Sonic appears again in Sonic Mania, where he's also defeated in Stardust Speedway. Oh no, I just pointed out a loophole for my argument. Also, this is modern Metal Sonic, the model that debuted in Sonic Rivals after the previous one with a different design was shut down in Sonic Heroes. Okay, minor correction. The previous Metal Sonic model's last appearance wasn't Sonic Heroes, it was actually Sonic Rivals, and he still had his copy ability. It's Sonic Rivals 2 that debuted the updated modern design. I haven't played the Rivals game, so I didn't know about this. And that's just an awesome detail that continues to support my point. And the Metal Sonic who was defeated in Stardust Speedway has his classic design.
The modern and classic designs of characters are just different art styles. The differences aren't canon. Sonic's always been 15 or 16. Oh, that's nothing. So?
That's how Sonic looked in the past.
Look, the timeline places Sonic 4 prior to Adventure purely because they used the modern Sonic design and nothing more. Episode 1 did this because this is Sonic's official design, and even though it was still in development, Generations wouldn't be announced for another year, bringing back the 90s design with it, marketed as Classic Sonic. And when Sonic 4 Episode 2 came out, they had to keep it about modern Sonic because Episode 1 did that. And I think we already fully established during the 2010s that Sonic Team didn't really give a damn about timeline and continuity. And I even made a short highlighting Metal Sonic's multiple design updates between games, and that it's actually pretty consistent how Eggman scraps or repurposes robots that are useless to him, and keeps what works and makes updates and changes to stuff that does work. Oh yeah mate, Orbot having different paint job and voice chip in Unleashed? Nah, totally different art direction. It's not canon. Metal Sonic's design was updated between Sonic Heroes and his next appearance in Sonic Rivals. He's a machine. He can be changed and upgraded. Every other character has gotten new 3D models between games, but they all still have the exact same designs they did in Sonic Heroes. Well, except Rouge, but she's just wearing different clothes. And circling back to this game's story outlined in the official timeline, it says the Death Egg Mark II is destroyed, except that's a full-on lie, because the game ends on a cliffhanger without any actual conclusion. Eggman builds his new Death Egg around Little Planet, because that's real original. He turned it into a big metal ball before. He also made a big metal ball with his face on it, so why not do both again at the same time? After the final boss, we see the area around Sonic and Tails blowing up as they take a pair of escape pods. When Little Planet had been freed from Eggman in both Sonic CD and Mania, we see it get freed and then disappear with some happy fireworks. But here, while we do see sun explosions as Sonic and Tails exit in their pods, but during the credits as they leave, the Death Egg Mark II is perfectly fine and intact. All that happens is when the credits end, the power goes out and the purple lights disappear, and the camera pans down back to Earth. Sonic Chronicles was a game that built on a hefty amount of lore established by past games, and it too ended on a cliffhanger, but with no definitive end or follow-up, because reasons. It can't tie back into events of the main canon. And in the case of Sonic 4, technically there's no to be continued or anything, but Little Planet isn't freed. It's still trapped in the Death Egg, and Sonic and Tails just left it there. That's not an ending! At the time, everyone was expecting presumably that this would be followed up by a Sonic 4 Episode 3 that followed the trend and pattern of the first two, would likely feature Knuckles and retread some elements from Sonic 3 and Knuckles. 2 years later, in 2014, a teaser dropped for Sonic 4 Episode 3, which turned out to be an April's Fool gag pulled off by members of the fandom. God damn, that was really that long ago, yikes! Of course, most fans had come to the conclusion due to the poor reception of Sonic 4 Episode 1 and 2 that an obviously planned Episode 3 had been cancelled. Of course, there was no actual evidence of its existence, but we just really didn't think too much about it afterwards. Until now. So completely out of nowhere, a beta build of Sonic 4 Episode 2 leaked, and within its files was a never-before-seen post-credit scene, which picks up with the reveal of the Master Emerald glowing, revealing it's in some mechanical room with the silhouette of Knuckles standing in front of it. From there, we see the camera perspective we see at the end of the final game's credits, where the Death Egg starts to power up again, and now with a Master Emerald green glow. And then dozens of Eggman UFOs appear, ending in a white screen saying "to be continued." Just wow, I can't believe I'm actually seeing this. So what does this tell us? First of all, Sonic 4's story does indeed have no conclusion, much like Sonic Chronicles. Both things outlined in its official timeline, Metal Sonic returning after CD and the Death Egg Mark II being destroyed, are both flat out incorrect and contradictions. Its only anchor to a timeline placement was its intention of being a sequel to Sonic 3 and Knuckles, which it failed at, and being the first event in the modern era prior to Sonic Adventure simply because it was designed with the modern character designs, which also entirely undermines Sonic Adventure being the debut of them, as well as a time skip seeing the characters we know for the first time since the classic era now as teenagers, and possibly for the first time seeing each other since then. To be honest, we don't need literally everything to be part of the canon. Sonic 4 is fine just existing as its own thing, disconnected from the main story of the series. It's very odd to see something very jarring and out of place that really doesn't fit, when everything else here is so relevant and specific to the history and world building, like the creation of the Gaias, the ancients settling on Earth, the Echidna tribe's past, and there's story and character arcs and how events from one game leads to another, and the timeline only neglects canon games that don't really add to that. And yet, here's Sonic 4. What's its significance? Episode 1? Nothing. Episode 2? Metal Sonic was brought back after CD, even though he's already been brought back after CD. This feels like the one thing on the timeline that feels so out of place it has to be some sort of mistake or error, but likely will not get an official explanation for this choice. If anything, they may change it randomly one day and sweep it under the rug. And changes might happen anyway in future, whenever they change their minds or decide something else works better, not unlike Legend of Zelda, who keep rearranging their official timeline every few years. Do I think things would be better if Sonic 4 Episode 3 came out? Probably not. I'd prefer not to have another story where Knuckles is an antagonist because Eggman tricked him again now. Like, how many times is that now? Even so, it seems Sonic 4 Episode 3 was canned before the second one was even finished, which is why the cutscene was likely removed, and the Cutting Room Floor sourced this blog post from 2015 where a former Sega brand manager talks about its cancellation and admits to there being a cutscene removed. This has been here on the internet since 2015, how about that? Also, apparently when Christian Whitehead was brought on to make his Sonic CD remaster official, he was approached about potentially working on Sonic 4 Episode 3 by Sega Studios Australia. Wait, we had a Sega studio here? Which was shut down in 2013? Wow, years later I'm still learning new things through Sonic freaking 4. What were we talking about again? Oh right, Sonic Timeline. Anyway, stay tuned and stay awesome. See you next time. This was worth spending my time on.